Each of the ingredients that I put into that pot taste delicious individually, but when you combine them all together, it becomes your toilet's worst nightmare because there was zero thought put into the meal as a whole. I compare this to what I see when someone shows me their investment portfolio and it is full of all kinds of different funds. Index funds, actively managed funds, sector funds, thematic ETFs, and whatever else the financial industry is pushing towards average people like us. Sometimes the investor has created this portfolio themselves, and other times it was created by a financial advisor charging an ongoing fee. Most of those guys are scumbags, so we'll deal with them specifically later in the video. These investors are causing major problems for themselves, and they don't even realize it yet. If you're one of these people, then I'll show you the huge mistake that you're making. If you're someone who doesn't hold a bunch of different funds yet, then you'll need to know this to protect yourself from it happening in the future. The reason anyone holds more than a few investment funds is because of stories and narratives. Two of the most powerful factors in the decisions that you make. I'm not denying the fact that you are doing it to make more money, but what it boils down to is a story that you have or were told about the future. Let me show you how stories can drive you to do things with your money that seem to make sense in the moment. Energy and utility prices have been on the rise lately, so if you want to capitalize on that sector, then owning a sector fund in one of those two areas would make a ton of sense for your portfolio. Healthcare. Americans are fat, sick, and nearly dead. These people are going to be spending tons of money in the healthcare industry in the coming decades. They also love their prescription pills. The average American takes 4 different medications. More than 131 million Americans take at least one prescription medication. Definitely buy that healthcare sector fund. Consumer staples. Did you see how much freaking toilet paper those weirdos were buying in 2020? They also love their highly processed, unhealthy, addictive foods. So you should take advantage of that kind of thing by investing in this sector. Innovation and disruption. Real flashy buzzwords, I know. But this is what the future is made of. Because of that, you should buy this theme-based ETF, ARK, that this lady Cathie Wood is always pushing on television. She seems like she really knows what she's talking about. I could go on and on with any specialty fund that you give me. It's super easy to come up with a story as to why you should buy anything and everything. Next thing you know, you have a Frankenstein-looking portfolio full of mutual funds and ETFs that destroy your portfolio returns and your sanity to the point where you're going to need those prescription meds to wind down from the anxiety that they cause you. This is problematic for many different reasons, but before I talk about those, please help support my dog Molly and this channel by subscribing, tapping the notification bell, and hitting that thumbs up button. I'll be the first to admit that the stock market and what drives prices is extremely complex. It's one of those things where the more you learn about a topic, the faster you realize that you don't know nearly as much as you originally thought you did. This goes for everything though. You might think that Homo sapiens have always existed in their current location across the world, but the process of getting there is way more complex. They started out in East Africa, slowly migrated through Europe, Asia, took boats down to Australia, then eventually crossed a land bridge from Russia into North America until most of the world was populated. This whole process took around 200,000 years to play out. On top of that, there were other species like Neanderthals and Denisovans that were alive during this time that didn't make it through. Just because a system like the stock market, investing, and everything else is complex, doesn't mean that the solution to mastering it has to be complex as well. There's no need to always match complexity with complexity. Einstein said, "Out of complexity, find simplicity," which is why he never did his hair. This dude just woke up and went right to the chalkboard to write equations down that I am way too dumb to understand. The reason modern humans made it through the first 200,000 years of their existence while other species didn't is because we were able to learn to streamline our lifestyle in a way that made it easier to survive. If we can find a simpler, more streamlined way to do things, then we should usually take that route if possible. Not only because it'll net better financial returns than most, but because it'll reduce natural human error and help us survive for longer, which we'll cover in more detail in just a minute. When someone shows me a portfolio like this, I ask myself something that this person should ask themselves as well. Why? Not only is this problematic because most of the funds are actively managed, which I talk about in the video that I just released recently, I'll have it linked up down in the description, but this is also problematic because there is one simple solution to all of these funds. At a high level, they're all either US stock funds and or US bond funds. Instead of holding 6 funds with an average cost of 0.55%, this person would only have to hold 2. A total US stock index fund and a total US bond fund where the average cost would only be 0.08%. We took this complex portfolio and turned it into a nice, simple, balanced portfolio through reducing the number of holdings by 67% and reducing the cost by 85%. All of the stocks in these random actively managed funds are already a part of these 2 types of index funds, so you're able to capitalize on anything that happens to go up. Take the complex problem and find a simpler solution. When you're in the weeds and looking at everything individually, it makes sense to start adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But when you take a step back and look at everything holistically, you start to notice all of the extra work that you're putting in to get to the same conclusion as a simplified portfolio would. Every aspect of a complex portfolio naturally takes more effort than a simple one. If something takes effort, that doesn't automatically mean that the outcome has value. But humans still attach value to all effortful things when we shouldn't. Let me show you what I mean. Simple Stan invested $100,000 into a few simple broad-based index funds. Complex Chris, on the other hand, invested $100,000 into a more complex fund made up of large, mid, small cap, theme-based, and sector-based funds with the intention of gaining an edge on the simple portfolio, and lo and behold, it worked because he actually outperformed. After 30 years, Stan's portfolio has grown to $761,000 due to a 7% average annual return, while Complex Chris's portfolio has grown to $875,000 due to a 7.5% average annual return. As many of you may or may not know, it is extremely difficult to beat a simple index fund-based portfolio. But let's suspend belief for a minute and assume someone put together a really solid group of funds that happen to do so. 0.5% of outperformance made Complex Chris $115,000 richer, which is amazing. Based on the results on the surface, it would make sense to invest in a complicated portfolio with the higher return. But this can be extremely misleading. We need to ask ourselves if the effort the individual put in made up for the outcome that they received. Chris is going to spend more time adding, removing, and managing the many funds that he owns. Even if he only holds those funds, Chris is surely going to be paying more attention to his portfolio, the stock market, or scouring the news related to the different funds that he owns. We'll say that Complex Chris spends about 5 hours per week on this sort of thing, which means he spends 5 hours per week for 30 years to make an extra $115,000. Now that equates to an hourly compensation of, wait for it, $15 per hour. In this instance, Chris needs to ask himself whether or not his time is worth more than $15 per hour. I'd imagine 99% of people watching this video are worth way more than $15 per hour. Because here's where it gets even crazier. The investor with the simple portfolio earning 7% per year needs to somehow catch up to the $115,000 that they're behind compared to the complex investor. Remember, we like to keep things simple instead of complicating everything. The simple investor would only need to invest an additional, wait for it, $102 per month to catch up to the $115,000 that the complex investor is ahead. $102 per month. If Stan makes $20 per hour, then that's only 5 hours of work per month that he needs to do, while Chris spends 4 times that since he enjoys keeping things complicated to get that $115,000 edge over 30 years. Is that value worth the effort through Chris's method or Stan's method? Even if Chris outperforms by 1% or spent 3 hours per week managing his portfolio, The math for whether or not it makes sense is still very questionable. Fun fact, according to a poll I did on my YouTube community tab, more than 80% of people think their time is worth way more than $30 per hour. If you've ever worked with a financial professional, most of them will put their investors into a portfolio full of 10 to 20 actively managed mutual funds. Why would they do this if it's been proven to be a less optimal way to invest compared to just going with a low-cost index fund portfolio? Because incentives drive behavior. I've worked in the supply chain field my whole life. Every aspect of it that you can think of, from forecasting at many different levels, shipping, transportation, planning, raw materials, all the way down to the actual manufacturing floor where I supported the guys and gals on the front line building the products. When I worked at the manufacturing level, one thing that was extremely important to us was the reduction in waste at every single level. Upper management would always make sure it was a big focus, and it was to a certain extent. But one day, our corporate overlords, upper management, decided to start incentivizing us to reduce waste through a quarterly bonus, which simply meant that the less we created, the more money we received. I swear to God, I had never heard any of the frontline builders on the manufacturing floor ever talk about waste. But once that incentive was introduced, holy smokes, it is all that they ever talked about. When we would have large waste events in the plant, everyone would come into my office looking for answers to find out what in the heck happened, since I had access to all of that data. To be honest, I loved it because it showed me that they finally gave a crap about something that my group was always measured on. But it's a great reminder that incentives drive behavior. Incentives drive everything. It's no different with financial professionals either. They're incentivized to squeeze as much money as possible out of you through their ongoing fees. To do this, they need to keep you as a client longer, put you in more expensive funds, and make your portfolio as complex as possible. Why wouldn't they just put you in one total US stock market index fund when they can slice and dice that same exact portfolio into 15 different sector and theme-based ETFs? Because complexity is job security for these people. The more complicated they make it, the more you're going to feel like you need them. If they just put you into one stock market index fund, then you might catch on to the fact that you probably don't need to be paying them 1% every single year for that. The more complex your portfolio, the more it looks like they're doing more work than they actually are. To make it worse, they'll usually get kickbacks from some of these individual funds if you are invested in them. So the more that they can put you in, the more money that they can make. Incentives drive behavior, and complexity can make everyone else rich while leaving you holding the bag. Don't just take my word for it though, because there were 2 studies that looked into this sort of thing. The first found that incentives lead to deception with advisor-client interactions. The second one found that clients' investments react noticeably and swiftly to changes in their advisors' incentives. The effect is larger for new clients, for clients who trust their advisors more, and for clients with lower financial knowledge. So basically, everybody. Can't wait for the comments down below telling me how wrong I am about the clear bias a financial advisor has who charges an expensive ongoing fee. Just wait for it. They'll try to belittle my points by saying that I'm just a guy on YouTube, but you don't have to be a freaking genius to understand basic human behavior. For the record, I'm pro financial advisor, but only if they're a true fiduciary who charges a one-time fee as opposed to ongoing fees. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check out the description of this video for additional resources to help you with financial independence, investing, and ways to help support my dog Molly as well as this channel. I'll see you in the next one, friends. Done.